The M4s are probably among the most difficult guns to use in the entire game, but by applying these simple tips, you'll be 10 steps ahead of your competition, so let's get into it. What's up, ProGuides fam? I'm Kangas, and today I'm talking about all the M4s and how to use them. There's actually a lot of things that aren't instantly obvious, and these tips will be useful at all ranks. So if you'd like to upgrade your M4 game, hit that sub button, and let's get into it. So, for the M4s, there's tons of things to keep in mind as you'll mostly be using it on the CT side. But the first thing you should start to think about is not exposing yourself to multiple angles at a time. When watching newer players play, it's really common to see them exposed to 2, 3, sometimes even 4 angles at the same time. Needless to say, that's just not going to get you a lot of wins. By exposing yourself to multiple angles at once, you're essentially forcing yourself to hit some really good flicks or just get lucky with guessing the correct angle. And that doesn't even take into account the fact that you can even get peeked from multiple angles simultaneously. Not only is opening yourself up to multiple angles at the same time unfavorable when there's only one enemy that can peek you, but it becomes so much worse if there's multiple people that peek you at once. Generally, the only time that exposing your back or side to another angle is okay is either when you're in an X versus 1, so there's only one opponent left and you have info on them, or you know for a fact that a teammate is covering your back and you don't have to worry about the other angles. Sometimes though, even though a teammate is covering the other angle, it's still not the best move. If you played ranked more than once, you've probably been disappointed by your teammates plenty, and if you rely on them like this, you're pretty much asking for it to happen again.
Real quick, I just want to let you all know that we have a 25% off discount going on the website right now. All you got to do is go in, check out, and enter code FPS25 to get that 25% off discount.
Before we move on though, of course we have to go over our question of the day. And today's fitting question is, what M4 do you use? Are you a dedicated M4A4 user, or do you prefer the silenced version? Maybe even like to switch in between the two. Personally, I like both, but I think the A4 is the better one, at least for the higher levels of play. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments down below. Speaking of angles, another thing that comes with that and is very important to make your M4 work is to only play favorable angles. The M4 is simply a worse gun than the AK, so you never want to take a fair fight against it, or you'll only be sabotaging yourself and your team. Of course, you still could go for an aggressive play every now and then, but when you do this, try to use your nades and mates to not make it a 50-50. Instead, consider playing angles like barrels on Overpass B site, where you can only be headshot and can peek or hide whenever you want. And it doesn't just have to be a headshot angle. There's plenty of good positions on all maps that check the boxes. All you need to look for is a position where you have cover and can choose when you want to fight, while the opponent has to commit to a fight to clear you. Basically, you want to make sure that if you're going to get killed, it's because your opponent had to run out all the way and force a fight, which isn't just really scary for them to do, but also allows your team time to help you out. For example, if you're playing a default box on Mirage and you're fighting someone Tetris, you could essentially just sit there indefinitely without fear of being killed. Of course, you could get mollied, but even then you could respond by smoking it and then you're back to safety. The only way the opponent could actually kill you there is either by peeking out wide from Palace or by running the whole way from Tetris. But in both of those cases, your Opera from jungle can easily kill them. Giving this tip oftentimes results in people taking it a bit too literally. There's a lot of people that will find a position they like to play at and proceed to play that exact same position literally every round. Yeah, don't do that. If you want to play the same position multiple rounds in a row, it starts to become very predictable and you're really opening yourself up to getting countered. It might not happen the second round you do it, maybe you even get away with it a third time, but if you keep doing the exact same thing over and over again, you're eventually going to see yourself getting naded, pre-fired, spammed, off-damn, you know the drill. Let's just say as soon as your opponents start to see a pattern, it's going to be a lot less fun to play that same position again. So your best bet is probably just to mix it up and try and surprise your opponents, at least every few rounds. If you want to make sure that you're playing right and aren't predictable, we advise booking a session with one of our many top-rated coaches. They can cover way more than I can in one video and will really help you fix your positioning and any other mistakes that you might be making. It's a really effective way to improve, and there's honestly nothing quite like it. And the final thing you should definitely think about when it comes to holding your angles is abusing Peeker's advantage. You've probably already heard of it, but Counter-Strike, like most other online FPS games, has inherent Peeker's advantage. Because of ping and the way the game works, whoever is the one peeking will see the opponent on their screen before the player that's holding the angle will. That means that unless you have an op, strong off angle, or extreme confidence, you probably don't want to be actually holding an angle, as in literally just standing there, waiting for your opponent to peek you. What you should do instead is pretty straightforward though. Simply unpeek and repeek the angle that you want to hold repeatedly. Doing this will achieve two things. Firstly, you'll make sure that you always have peeker's advantage, because you're never the one holding the angle and you're always peeking. And second, it also allows you to get timing on your enemy. You know that feeling when you're holding an angle and just as you turn away to look at something else, the guy on the other side decides, now it's finally time to peek. Well, yep, that's what you're allowing yourself to do in this situation. So now, instead of getting timing to yourself, you might finally timing someone else, and it's gonna feel really good. The reason this works is because a lot of people try to clear angles really quickly, so they'll pre-aim the angle that you're playing and then quickly move on to the next one. Only now the catch is that you're not holding the angle, but you're playing unpeek, repeek, and thus you're able to catch him off guard. It's a pretty simple strategy, but it's going to give you lots of free kills, so go try it out. Alright, moving away from angles, it's now time to think about another mechanic, that being spraying. Spraying is extremely important to get down, especially with the M4. With an AK, you might be able to get away with just knowing how to tap and burst, especially if you're, I don't know, Scream. But with an M4, that won't do. In order to be good with the M4, you really have to practice the spray pattern. So in order to do that, we'd advise hitting up the Recoil Master Practice map. There, you'll be able to intuitively and easily practice your spraying without the pressure of the real game. It's great for isolated practice and is really beginner friendly. To find it, just Google Recoil Master and click on the first stream workshop link. Then subscribe to the map and you should be able to find it in game under your workshop maps. Another thing you should note in order to put your M4 to good use is how to use your nades. An M4 is only half as effective if you don't have the right nades surrounding you, so it's really important to get this right. Not only are nades important to use to delay pushes, but they should also be used to get out of bad situations, allow for peeks, and also start retakes. It's really common for people to use all the utility out of spawn and have nothing left by 1 minute 35, and that's simply not the way to go. Alternatively, you have people that refuse to use their nades at all, and oftentimes they'll even dry peek oppers without ever having tried to use their flashes or smokes. Make sure that you use your nades, but do have a goal in mind when you do so. Don't just throw away your nades without reason, but also don't save them for Christmas 2030 either. They're not collectibles, folks. Something else that you should think about that's actually also different from the T side is crosshair placement. Crosshair placement when attacking versus defending is really different, and not everybody realizes that. The truth is, when you're clearing angles from T side, you're pretty much always holding your crosshairs exactly next to the wall as you're peeking into it. While if you're on the CT side, and thus probably holding an angle, you want to be holding your crosshairs not on the wall, but quite a bit wider than it. The reason for that is because people are generally going to be peeking wide into you if you're holding an angle. And if you're doing the unpeeking, repeeking like we talked about before, people will generally be out a bit wider too, as they already had some time to get out of the angle. That means that you need to adjust for it with your crosshair placement as well. It's very common to see people, even in higher levels of matchmaking, hold their crosshair pretty much at the edge of the wall, but this is simply wrong. Unless you have a trigger bot, you won't be hitting those shots, and assuming you're not a cheater, you thus want to be holding a bit wider. Keep that in mind when holding your angles, and you should see a lot of success pretty much instantly. And the next tip is just a classic. You gotta think about mixing it up and surprising your opponents, and that's by going for aggressive plays, at least every now and then. Even though on the CT side, the opponents have to come to you, going aggressive is something that you should definitely do every few rounds. By going aggressive every so often, you put a lot of pressure on the opponents as they constantly have to be watching the flanks, meaning that their pushes will be more telegraphed and they'll feel less confident. If that's not enough reason to do it though, it's also just a lot of fun. So maybe that'll sell it for you. One thing you should be careful about though, is that you're not doing it every round. You're just going aggressive to be unpredictable and apply pressure, not to give up a free kill and make it obvious what you're doing. And since I told everybody to go aggressive, it's also time to scale it back. Something that's even more important than getting aggressive is just staying alive. On the CT side, and especially as an M4 player, it's very important. The CT side is mostly dictated by the ops, and in order for them to be effective, they need riflers to be alive and watch their flanks. If you as a rifler die early, it becomes increasingly difficult for your opper teammates to hold angles, and at that point, the round is pretty much lost. That again doesn't mean that you shouldn't bait everyone and wait for your entire team to die before you do anything, but it does mean that you should see what your oppers want to do and try and play around them. That way, you'll put both yourself and your teammates in the best position possible to perform and easily win the game. And the final tip, we actually already mentioned a bit in the previous one, but it's playing as a team. On the T side, pretty much everyone understands that it's a team game and people try and work together. But for some reason, while defending, it barely ever happens. The CT side, though, is arguably even more reliant on teamwork. Alone, it's really difficult to cover a bunch of angles, but if you have a teammate supporting you with flashes, or just covering the angles that you can't watch, it instantly becomes so much easier. Try helping your mates out in the coming games, and you'll see yourself having much stronger T sides without that much hassle. So everybody, make sure you apply all these tips and keep your opponents on edge. If there's any confusion about how to use them, remember you can always book a session with one of our top-ranked coaches to go over really in-depth tips. They got way more knowledge than we can cover in a single video, so if you're still confused, go check them out. And also on the website ProGuides.com, you can even find and get access to the one and only simple master course written by the GOAT of CS, and now the 3-year in a row top 2 player in all of Counter-Strike. This guy knows what he's talking about, and he wants to help you out just as much as we do. So all you gotta do is check out the course. That's it for the video, so good luck grinding, everybody, and I'll see you in the next one.